But by the time that season opens, to us anyway, north of 70, it seems like them birds are already pretty much done gobbling.
Well, that's not true.
Zing.
People commonly tell me that poults drown when it's raining. Well, that's not true. They don't look up into the rain and drown.
Well, we used to hear that as kids. Turkeys are so damn dumb, they'll stand out there and drown. Yeah,
I've heard that my whole life.
Nuzzle in there to get warm, and she will basically protect them from the elements and exposure during that time. The problem with, and I have a really great handle on this now because I've been a hen.
The man says with a straight face.
What bathroom do you use? Sorry.
Outside. A turkey poult needs to eat about 4,000 bugs a day.
Holy smokes.
That's just for it to grow at the rate it should.
Did you say 4,000?
Yeah.
Per day.
That's a lot of bugs. Have y'all ever tried to catch 4,000 bugs?
Good
That's
Lord.
a lot of bugs.
I need to take them with me in bow season to keep the mosquitoes off.
Welcome to Saltlick Worldwide Podcast, your ultimate destination for hunting, fishing, conservation, and gear. From international hotspots to the backwoods of America, we bring you the real stories, raw opinions, and the conversations others won't have. Buckle up. The adventure starts now.
Welcome back to Salt Lake Sessions Podcast, where we talk about the stuff everybody else avoids because it might upset sponsors, algorithms, or that one guy who thinks accountability is a hate crime. Today's co-host lineup is basically a warning label. I've got Mike Sumner back in the studio for the first time since our inaugural episode. Filmed off my dock with janky cameras, 2 microphones, beer, rum, and the kind of confidence you only see right before somebody says, nah, I'm good to drive. Great episode, by the way. I think 3 people watched it.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks, Mom. So Mike's the Okeechobee County Commissioner for District 5, which is honestly impressive considering he's been hunting with me for over 20 years. So either Mike is genuinely responsible public servant or local government hiring standards are basically the same as deer camp. He showed up, he's wearing pants, send it. We've also got Captain Mike Murray back in the studio, and if this episode gets flagged, demonetized, or disappears into the algorithm like a bad decision at 2 a.m., we don't need an investigation.
It's offensive.
We need to look at Mike Murray and then, of course, to ourselves as we ask why we keep giving him a microphone.
Clicks, baby.
We've also got Oscar Maldonado because every group needs one more guy that hears this might get us in trouble and responds with, good, that's good for views.
Exactly.
So to keep this from turning into a turkey hunting argument with emotional maturity of a bar fight behind a strip club, we brought in an actual professional. Dr. Marcus Lashley from the University of Florida Game Lab. Welcome to the Salt Lick Sessions Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, Doc, appreciate you coming on, and I'm definitely looking forward to talking turkeys. It's that time of the year that everybody gets excited for. I know I've got birds in Kentucky right now that are just starting to sound off as of this morning, which was pretty cool to see. But to start with, can you just give us a little background? Tell us, who is Dr. Lashley, and talk to us a little bit about the Game Lab.
Yeah. Well, I started as a hunter, so particularly turkey hunting has been my passion since I was a little kid. And I grew up in western Alabama in a place where turkeys were always there. So, we in the early 19th through the, about the mid 20th century, there were a lot of areas where they were no longer present, and that was not one of them. So all the men in my family for generations have been obsessed with turkeys, and I have carried that torch on. So that's why I'm here. So I'm the director of the UF Game Lab here at the University of Florida, and we study various things with multiple game species, but the majority of our work now is focused on turkeys. And there's several reasons why. One of those is because I'm obsessed with turkeys and always have been, and I figured I may as well do that.
You make your own rules.
But, there's also a lot of concerns about turkey populations, and, that's a peak interest now. So that has given me the opportunity to really focus on that species. And a lot of the things that people hear from me now are, work that we're doing, trying to figure out what's going on or what we can do about it.
How does one get into turkey research? I mean, was that something you just had a passion for, or did you kind of fall into it later in life?
Well, I've always been a real curious person, and, growing up hunting, it wasn't enough for me to just, figure out how to get close to a turkey or a deer. I wanted to really look under the hood and figure out what was going on, at a deeper level. And it's just part of my personality. I've always been like that. My mother likes to tell me stories, when I had a few ponds that I had access to go fish in, and I'd come home with a boot full of crawfish and, all kinds of things that I was catching in the ponds. And I even had some fish in a tank, and I would, do trials trying to figure out what was best to fish with based on which pond I was in. So just, things like that have always been a part of who I am. I can't help it. You kind of posed it like it was a choice, and I view it as there really wasn't a choice. That's all I could do. And, just a lot of dedication and focus. I'd never have veered from that path, and I kept working hard and came upon some opportunities to get into game research, and ultimately led me to here, where now I'm the PI leading the turkey research. So it's kind of crazy looking back on it, that I would have made it to here, especially coming from where I did. Not that many people went into higher education. And even my mother says she can't believe I even went to college. But, when you're passionate about something and stick to it, perseverance sometimes gets you to that end.
Coming in from the outside anyway, I started following you guys on social media. Oscar's actually the one that turned me on to you guys and what you were doing. And then I started diving in to some of your podcasts, and there was, I think there was some really good ones on there that I really liked, especially, and we'll get into it later. But, fire specifically and burning was something that piqued my interest when I watched that. And you've got another doctor on from, I think, University of Auburn that was on with you and back and forth. And I really enjoyed it. So that's kind of been my binge thing lately is listening to all y'all's podcasts. But so for people that don't know, though, what exactly, I mean, just give me, I don't want necessarily an overhead view, but what does the game lab actually do there? I mean, obviously you guys are studying turkeys and habitat, and there's other flora and fauna that you're studying, but give us kind of a more, I don't know, better than I can explain anyway, detail about what the lab does.
Yeah, so this is a research and education lab, I guess. So most of our work now is focused on turkeys, although I have a graduate student focused on deer and another one that's studying just science communication in general, trying to figure out how we can reach people better. And then I have some communication staff that are trying to help us put it into some sort of context that's meaningful to people. But what we spend a lot of our time doing is performing research. So we have a captive turkey population that's wild turkey genetics here in Gainesville. We have various experiments ongoing in that are allowing us to do some work that you can't do in wild populations. The capstone of that work is when we hatch out poults each spring and imprint those on the researchers, so they literally think I'm mama. And we have manipulated habitat so that we have it really well designed, so we can work out exactly how can you manage poult rearing cover to optimize poult rearing success. And the reason we're doing that is because it's really difficult to study in the wild, because they start out about 4 inches tall and then they double in weight essentially every 13 or 14 days. So that we don't have the technology really to track them through that process without it becoming a problem for the process itself. So in other words, like we don't have a transmitter we could put on them that wouldn't also cause them to die more frequently. So it's really difficult to study them at that life stage. And that's where we have developed this project where we're literally imprinting them on us and serving as the surrogate hen, so to speak, to forge them in these different plots. So that's kind of our showcase program, and there's all kinds of unbelievable work that's coming from that that we really need to understand to manage and conserve the species well, but you can't really do in a wild population very easily or at all in some cases. So we have that going on. We also have had multiple field projects all over the state where we're actually catching wild turkeys and putting GPS transmitters on them. We've done some work with hens and toms across the state. The last 4 years, we've had multiple sites down in the heart of the Osceola range where we were doing that. And we have other projects. We've had the autonomous recording units, it's basically recording sound. We've had those on 20 plus sites from the southern edge of the Osceola range all the way out to the tip of the panhandle. So we can get a really good handle on things related to gobbling, trying to understand what is driving gobbling. And we can also evaluate some things at larger scales, especially with the wildlife corridor effort in Florida. So that's what we're spending the majority of our time doing, is trying to get information that we can then develop products to give to people so that you can use it to make decisions ultimately on how to manage turkeys across the state.
That's cool. I never. Yeah. The imprinting with the Poults. That's pretty cool.
Now, what are the addresses for those big toms? Just
Or can we get that data from the GPS trackers? Just for the toms.
Yeah, it's not publicly available.
Well, we get that. That's why we want it.
Hey, I've got a completely off-topic question, though it is still turkeys. Most people think that go to the state of Florida for an Osceola. We've said for years down here, anything north of State Road 60s, as much eastern or more. Do y'all have anything in your research, like you mentioned, the Osceola range? Where do you consider the demarcation line, or at least where the majority of the bloodline is still Osceola?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually have collected genetic samples all over the state at a really fine resolution. That was because of the hunting community. Folks, when they hunt, and maybe even you guys have given us some, we've gotten them from hunters all over the state. And that is we're basically in the middle of processing it right now. So we'll have a lot of really great information about genetics, and we're not really. I don't have anything to tell you other than, I could definitely seeing it below the currently accepted line.
What is the currently accepted line?
It's essentially Gainesville.
Okay. Yeah, because even like I've got a bunch of kinfolk up in Hillsborough County, and if you know the difference in what you're looking at, those are clearly eastern birds. We've got these little old jet black 14-pound pure Osceolas, and those that they're shooting there in Pinecrest look like they're shooting them in Fort Gaines, Georgia.
Yeah. Well, what you see, and I put my hands on a whole bunch of birds up in all over the state, and a bunch of hens in particular, sort of in North Florida. And what we see a lot in this part of the region is we'll see birds that are even genetically sisters, that one will look, it'll have characteristics that are more similar to Easterns, particularly with the wing barring and even size to some degree. And then, her sister looks like Osceola. So I think we're probably, that what that's telling me is there's probably some mixing going on genetically. And what is more likely the case is that it's sort of a gradient, right? And we want it to be a gradient to some degree. And what I mean by that is you go from, it's not just a hard stop from Eastern to Osceola. There's some overlap there where they're mixing genetically. And, the Florida corridor, for example, one of the designs of that is to ensure there's connectivity between populations. And that's exactly what you would expect it to happen, is that there's overlap genetically. And that's a good thing.
You actually beat me to that question. That was
Was that in our notes somewhere down the line? Sorry about that.
I was absolutely.
I haven't read the notes since I was in Gainesville, and that was a long time ago.
Well, yeah. So, and I'll just go back a little bit. When we talk about we did a bow shoot in Jacksonville with Paul. I don't know, it was
And
Staffen.
Staffen.
Yeah,
I remember y'all doing that.
So we're at the bow shoot, and these turkeys, they live there. They don't get hunted because they're on the preserve right next to the I think it's a Navy base there, the Navy base.
Mayport.
And yeah. So and you're doing the shirt, and there's turkeys everywhere, and we look around, and Mike says, "Man, look at them turkeys!" Right. Of course, we're joking about shooting turkey at a bow shoot, which is is kind of frowned upon apparently.
Depending on the time of year, I guess.
But he said, "Man, what's wrong with that turkey over there?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what's wrong with that turkey?" He's like, "Why does it look like that?" Because that's an Osceola. He's never seen an Osceola before. All he's ever seen is Easterns. So there were both, and you could clearly see the difference between those two birds in Jacksonville, and they were, they're all grouped up together.
That might be some of that mixing like he was talking about.
And those Easterns that Mike is used to seeing in Johnstown, Ohio, weigh 25 pounds.
That's also
They
true.
live in corn and soybeans their whole life. They're a totally different critter than what we've got down here.
We're kind of diving into this a little bit more too. What is turkey hunters are horrible in that I see.
Well,
listen,
thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I resemble that statement, by the way. Yeah, as bad as deer hunters are about arguing back and forth, man, you get some turkey hunters together and they will argue about everything. Well, I mean, from roosting birds to the birds aren't gobbling, the season needs to start earlier, and that's
not an argument. That's a fact.
we can dive in there. I knew that was going to come up soon.
That is a fact.
All right, Dr. Lashley, let's get this one out of the way first. This is what everybody came for anyway. So the vast majority of hunters that I talk to anyway, especially here and we're in Okeechobee, right? So season starts this coming weekend, south of State Road 70, but then not
200 yards that direction.
Yes.
But not up here for another 2 weeks.
Right. So and I've actually seen it with you too. So by the time that season opens, and we admittedly we are right on the line, but by the time that season opens to us anyway, north of 70, it seems like them birds are already pretty much done gobbling.
Well, that's not true.
Zing.
So
Did you hear that, Mike?
One thing that we are working on currently, and this will be publicly available, y'all will be able to see the data. One of the problems with the ARUs that I was talking about is we have like 10 million hours of data, and we have to use AI to sort it, and it takes still months to get through just 1 year of data. So it's really, it takes a while to get this kind of stuff done. But we had these gobbling monitors all the way from Picayune Strand, I think was the southernmost place, all the way out to the tip of the Panhandle, and that was one thing we're really interested in. The state agency's really interested in is trying to figure out what does gobbling chronology look like and how's that changing across the state. Do our current seasons actually capture the gobbling, or if not, is there something we need to do about it so that there's a better experience for the hunting community? So that, that's the vein of that is, we're trying to optimize that timing. And it, frankly, in a place like Florida, one of the big factors that's playing in is latitude. And there's a huge change in latitude in Florida. So there's probably not one size fits all, right? And so we've got it split into two. And of course, I had nothing to do with that. That's been that way for a long time. But, that's one thing that this work is evaluating. How much of the gobbling are we capturing? And, if there are changes, what should that look like in the state so that we provide everybody the same kind of opportunity? And, what I can tell you, we established those monitors at the beginning of February generally, and then continue that on through the end of June. And a large portion of the gobbling is being captured by the season in most places. So that's kind of the Cliff's Notes to start with. But that work is currently in review at a journal, so it'll be public as soon as it's vetted.
Well, and I grant that. That being said, and it wasn't the case when I was a kid, and it does seem to be more and more the case now, and I don't know if it's climate change or wetter or drier or what it is, but we are now hearing birds gobble and watch them strut at the end of deer season, which is in January. And maybe that happened my whole life and I just failed to see it, but my time spent in the woods is no more or less than it was when I was 7. And we're just dang sure seeing it. And for the last, I told you my son's up there in Gainesville now, he's 20. So we got to youth hunting here in Okeechobee. And from 13 to 16 or whatever that time was, there was even a marked difference for that youth weekend. By the time the regular season started 2 weeks later, it was clearly less. And for the last couple of years, we're done 2 or 3 weeks. And yes, you can still go get set up. You can find that lone bird. But the general activity, that where you're watching the jakes fight and watching the gobblers go out there and chase the jakes off, from a eyes in the field, not a recorder somewhere, our turkey rut activity, for lack of a better way of putting it, and I know that's not the right term, our turkey rut activity is petering out well before the season does. And that's just my vision from the ground and everybody else I talk to, frankly.
Yeah. Well, there's probably multiple things going on. One, the way that most states are trying to situate the season is about basically starting right at or just slightly after the first peak in gobbling. So some of that might be real, what you're saying, where it's just, the gobbling is decreasing. Another thing that's happening is turkeys are getting removed, right? And especially the ones that gobble a lot, probably. So that's probably happening too. And a third thing that you may perceive, and I don't think people appreciate this enough, but we can see it clear as day on our GPS data, is the turkeys change where they're doing it. And what it seems like is happening when you kind of put the two together is hens are seeking areas that are good for nesting, a little later in the season, and gobblers are following them to that.
Could hunter pressure have something to do with that as well?
Exactly where I was going.
Yeah. So that's, I was kind of lumping that in with turkeys are getting removed, but there could also be, they could just stop gobbling because it's risky to gobble, right? That we have a lot less information on for me to tell you from a scientific standpoint, but it makes sense that, if it's risky to gobble, that they might be, less vocal. And then I have hunted turkeys in a lot of places, and it does seem like even the hens are less responsive and less vocal, in populations that are heavily hunted. So problem is it's hard to work out what is just density versus a spatial avoidance versus the behavior of the animal actually changing, from just not vocalizing as much. That's really difficult to detangle, which is why I don't want to seem like I'm sidestepping it, but I'm also trying to relay to you that it's probably some combination of those factors, and it's hard to work out exactly which one it is.
Yeah, and the different turkeys have different personalities. They're just like people. There's plenty of birds that will gobble at you once from the roost, and when he comes down, he's either making a beeline for you or he's making a beeline going the other way, or he gets stopped by a hen somewhere along the way.
Sure.
It will be interesting this year. For the first time in 15 years, we had proper cold weather, proper killing weather within the last few weeks. And literally, we sat there January, whatever it would have been, 15th-ish, and saw 2 gobblers strutting with a bunch of hens in our normal turkey woods. And it seemed that they were in proper breeding scenario. It had been warm. We were moist enough still. Since then, it's gone completely dry, and we had those freezes. So it'll be interesting to look at this season as it comes up. Maybe the fact that it's been warmer has had those birds kind of acting a little earlier. And we'll see this year if that's going to be maybe a factor or not.
Yeah, I can tell you this, and this is coming from hard data. We've been studying nesting, and when that happens, which is a pretty good index of when breeding's happening. So first of all, when they're going through that winter breakup, the males start when they start to have a spike in testosterone. You start to see them strutting, and that doesn't necessarily mean the female is receptive to actually mating.
Sounds like Oscar on a Friday night.
You beat me to it again, man.
What's your point?
So
You're making our point. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on with that.
the onset of those hormonal changes that are actually getting the hen to be receptive, that is driven by day length. Okay, so that's kind of set in a given population. The day length that they respond to in South Florida is different than the day length in Minnesota, but it's still day length that is causing that cascade of hormones that makes them receptive. So that being said, when you study a population year after year, there's some slack in the timing of nesting, and that's probably environmental, where they're responding to differences in weather or some other factors possibly. So you could see it move, and I would say we probably see like a 2-week window of slack in where that peak might be in a given population. So some of that may be weather driven, what you were just saying. If it was unusually hot and for years, maybe it was a couple weeks earlier because there's some slack in that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And like I say, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll all be our version of proof, our eyes in the ground will come up here in the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably reach out and tell you if we found anything different.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting. We've got a whole bunch of turkeys tagged down there and have for the last 4 years, so we'll see it in the data. The other thing I wanted to point out is, the males are starting to strut and with their harem of hens, so to speak. And when they are receptive, that hen can store sperm for at least 60 days. We're not sure how long it is, but there's work showing that it's at least that long. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about in the grand scheme of things, because you might be seeing, I know that copulation is happening in the middle of February because people send me videos of it all the time. So some breeding probably is occurring, and she can store sperm. And there's been a lot of work, some of it just recently out of South Carolina, showing that multiple fathers are represented in between a third and half of nests.
So that could also explain those two sisters that look different that you were talking about out of the same clutch.
They could come out of the same nest, and they could have different mothers and fathers.
Huh.
Because their multiple maternity is also happening, because there's some sneaky hens that will walk around and slip an egg in somebody else's nest.
Somebody else hit this for me.
And some hens apparently don't even nest. They just slip their eggs in somebody else's.
That's pretty wild. I had no idea.
They're what we'd call cheaters.
Yeah. Well, and there's all kinds of birds of paradise and stuff that literally go throw the other one's egg out and drop their egg off and carry on. But I didn't know it with turkey.
I'm still hung up with the storing semen thing. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought that was pretty much a one shot.
So that was only in Juarez?
Yeah, I didn't know that was a real thing.
That's the thing. People ask me that sometimes, like, well, how, like, if you see one copulate, how long will it be till she nests? Sometime in the next couple months. That's what you know from that.
And the old cracker wives' tale, I've always been told, and it's clearly wrong, learn something new every day, that they basically lay an egg a day until they get their clutch together and then they sit it.
Yeah, so that actually is true, but
Old cracker wives' tales are good sometimes.
some truth and some fallacy to a lot of those things. The hen could get bred in mid-February and then start nesting in the beginning of April and use that sperm, apparently. And once she initiates nesting, so once she decides it's time, whether she's consciously doing that or it's just biological or whatever, once she lays an egg, she usually skips a day, and then she lays an egg a day after that.
I'll be damned.
So, and the average clutch size is about 10, so roughly 10. So you can expect for 11 or 12 days, she's going to be laying. What she's typically doing the first few days, she'll come in, lay an egg, and then she'll leave within a few minutes of that. And she kind of progressively increases that amount of time that she's staying there to where by the time she's on egg 6 or 7, she's staying there a couple hours.
So and, what if then a raccoon or a possum or an armadillo or a coyote or something gets in there and tears up that nest? Will she start again? And if so, would it be that one and then a day off and then one a day thereafter if she has to redo her nest?
Yeah, and there could be variation in the amount of time that she takes to start renesting, but most hens initiate another nest, especially if they lose it during laying like that. So, and what we've observed is when a hen loses her nest during laying, she usually just goes somewhere else and starts again, like pretty quickly. Whereas if she was already in incubation, the probability that she renests after she was incubating is lower. There's still a large portion of them still renest again, and sometimes even 3 or 4 times. We've observed some hens renesting 4 times. That's a lower probability. But she usually has more time in between as well. Like if she nests and then gets to that incubation where she's actually sitting on the eggs through the night, if she loses that nest, it's usually more time before she starts again then, based on our data from South Florida at least.
See, and that's let's kind of go into that.
Was I meant to find that in the notes?
No, you're definitely not. There's nothing about semen in there. I will guarantee you there was 0 about semen, but Doc went there, so.
Aaron, I misread this.
See, the doctor reads it and screws it up. I don't read it and screw it up. We're perfect.
Well, and that's
you can't ever tell where this is going to go.
Well, so not a question, but more of a statement I was going to make was, how much of, what turkey hunters deem as what we actually know is actually true. And you just threw a monkey wrench into a bunch of shit I thought I knew right away.
It confirmed some of mine, though.
Yeah,
so.
That's good.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I can see both perspectives because I was a hunter first and was a hunter for a long time before I was a scientist. And, I've been down that road a lot where I thought I knew something and then I didn't. And I think what actually is a better way to put it is that you know stuff, but there's nuance. And that sort of, you end up with some half truths over some things. So, one example, for example, people commonly tell me that poults drown when it's raining. Well, that's not true. They don't look up into the rain and drown.
Well, we used to hear that as kids. Turkeys are so damn dumb they'll stand out there and drown. Yeah.
Yeah. But they do like to stand in the rain when it's raining. They do kind of stand where they're optimizing, not getting wet. So it sort of looks like they're looking up at the rain. And the other thing is when you have a 7-day-old poult that hasn't grown in its flight feathers yet, it can't thermoregulate. It's a little puff ball, and that little fuzzy feather structure that it has soaks up water, and it doesn't thermoregulate well, and it will absolutely kill the poult.
Freeze that little sucker to death.
Especially if you don't have good poult rearing cover around, they will die from that. Especially if you have 2 or 3 days in a row that's ill-timed for a particular clutch, based on their age. that can kill them, but it's not because they're drowning, right? So that's my point is, turkey hunters have observed that when we have a really wet spring, we might have less productive poults, but they've associated that with the wrong factor that's driving it.
Water's getting them, but they ain't getting them in their lungs.
Let me ask you this: Will the hen help them out? Can they shelter underneath the hen? Or
yeah, so she has a brood patch. Y'all probably seen some of these really striking images that a lot of folks, some of them in South Florida, we have some great photographers down there, have captured, where you have a bunch of poults underneath the wings of. So she has a brood patch, and they'll kind of nuzzle in there to get warm, and she will basically protect them from the elements and exposure during that time. The problem with, and I have a really great handle on this now because I've been a hen.
The man says with a straight face.
What bathroom do you use? Sorry.
Outside. Yeah. So one problem that they're facing, if you have an extended rainfall event, a turkey poult needs to eat about 4,000 bugs a day.
Holy smokes.
Okay. That's just for it to grow at the rate it should.
Did you say 4,000?
Yeah.
Per day.
That's a lot of bugs. Have y'all ever tried to catch 4,000 bugs?
Good
That's
Lord.
a lot of bugs.
I need to take them with me in bow season to keep the mosquitoes off.
Well, it's funny, y'all may, if you've seen any of our media, I've had a couple of times where they've eaten mosquitoes or ticks off of me. So that they do that. So my point of that is they have to be taking in insects really rapidly. Well, if it's raining and they're having to stay under mama, even though they're staying warm and not dying from exposure, then they have a different reason to die. They will start losing weight, and then they'll die from starvation, essentially, if it's long enough. So you can see how a 3 or 4 day rain event at the wrong time in that poult's life, it could be detrimental to that brood.
It kills them in several ways, sounds like.
Yeah, like they have all kinds of ways to die. And that's another thing that I think, and I know that y'all had some stuff on this list to talk about. That's another thing that is a misconception, especially at that poult stage. Predation is one way to die, but there's a whole bunch of other ways to die. And that is a really sensitive window in its life. And we're talking about a 13-day window. From the time it hatches to 13 days, that is the gauntlet right there. And they have all kinds of reasons to die. And some of them you can't necessarily control. Like if it rains 3 days in a row and it's in that 13-day window, they might die from it.
And is that as true in, like South Florida, for example, where obviously we are bound to get some rain in the spring, but, it's still, relatively speaking, it's still 95 during the day, as opposed to some place like even southern Georgia or northern Kentucky or southern Ohio where...
Cold and rainy.
Yeah, cold and rainy. Is it just rain in general, or are they more likely to survive in our kind of environment here versus the northern climate?
They're more likely to survive one way to die, but they have other ways to die that are
Bobcats and coyotes and such.
So, when we start getting up into about Mason-Dixon line and start going north, it's much easier to die from cold exposure, but here it's easier to die from heat exposure. So another way to die, and this one is particularly relevant to the way that we manage vegetation. If they don't have a Forb community canopy when they're foraging around, not only is it not very buggy, but when they are in the heat, and we've got really phenomenal data on this from our poult work, because being too hot is a really common thing in Florida. If they do not have a high quality vegetation structure available to forage in, then they are at risk to heat exposure, especially in the afternoon when it's really hot down here. They need that kind of Forb dominated structure so that they can meander around underneath it in the heat of the day. Otherwise they get too hot, and that's a different reason to die. but that's not as common up in the northern range, right? It's more common for cold to be the problem up there, whereas here it's the heat seems to be more important.
Well, and that seems same thing with the adult turkeys. You always find them in the hammocks in the afternoons because it's too dang hot to be out there in the pasture.
I have a question about fire ants as it
you got me again.
as it pertains to foraging. I mean, so he's telling me that there's going to be 10 poults that need 4,000 bugs a day. Well, it seems to me that could wipe out a fire ant hill pretty good, unless
the fire ants eat the poult.
they can't eat them. So that's kind of a Godzilla versus Kong thing.
If I can, let me just jump in there, because a couple weeks ago we did a bird shoot. We went out and hunted with Austin,
Sure.
and Austin was adamant that the decline in turkey population, the number one reason is fire ants, and I didn't know whether that was true or not, so I researched a little bit. But we're going to ask Dr. Lashley right now to push the bullshit button on that. Yeah, I know. I watched it.
I know that we've always heard that was a detriment for the quail population in the south. It was the fire ant, ground nesting birds in general.
Yeah. Well, so this is another one of those things that there is some truth in there. With turkeys, there's no evidence that we're losing nests because the fire ants are eating the nest or killing, the nest. There is with a suite of other ground nesting birds. Okay. And not all of them are ground nesting. Even there's other birds that are not ground nesters that's also a problem. There was one, I think I found one reference to fire ants in the literature for turkey nests, and they had a camera on the nest, and they noted that once something had gotten the nest, ants moved in. So, there's broken eggs, and they came in and they moved the eggshells around and everything, and it made it really hard for them to determine what caused the nest to fail. But other than that, there isn't any evidence that we're losing nests to fire ants. I personally have seen Poults deal with fire ants. One thing that I noted, a Poult got, all of a sudden it started acting really erratic. So it's kind of running around, everybody else is foraging, and this one Poult's kind of like running in circles and chirping and, not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I finally realized that there was a fire ant on its foot biting it, and it kind of freaked out. And it ultimately ate the ant, but there were several minutes that it did that, and that would have definitely made it and others more vulnerable, because it was being loud and running around instead of foraging under, the vegetation like it should have been. So, that some things like that could be happening, and that'd be really difficult to detect with our scientific methods we have available. The other thing that I think is more concerning about fire ants is that they can really impact the insect community. So I would say a more likely problem with fire ants would be that there aren't as many grasshoppers and spiders and things that, that poults eat. And that would be the avenue that they'd be more likely to influence turkeys just in general. Because
So the ants are actually in competition for the food source.
yeah. And there is evidence from other researchers that have worked on a bunch of different kinds of birds and other systems, and they do cause problems. And some of those problems might be a problem for turkeys. But in terms of it being because they're eating the nests, we don't have any evidence that that's true. I've never detected a nest that we thought had anything to do with fire ants.
So I think that's a wives' tale we can dispel.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear it all the time.
Yeah, you hear it constantly.
I mean, obviously predation is a big thing, but fire ants, I don't know. And I probably even bought into that at one point in time. I'm sure I had a grandpa or an uncle that told me that, and I bought it.
Yeah. Well, you could also imagine if she was on a nest and a fire ant hill got there and she disturbed it, and then they started biting on her and everything, it might make her flush, and you could see where that there could be some ways that they could cause a nest to be lost. But we've never detected one that had an anthill on it. And also the way that they nest, it's a little different from some of these other birds where they're disturbing things and they're bringing in vegetation, and there's a lot of things that some of these species do that kind of disturb the ground, and fire ants might be attracted to that. Turkeys aren't doing a lot of those things. They're kind of just like making a little depression in the area and sitting on it.
Well, and this may be another wives' tale, or it could be a happenstance. Don't they also oftentimes nest in like a high spot in the middle of a wet spot? So, in other words, a little mound in say, a flag pond, where an ant wouldn't necessarily swim over there to them in the first place.
We have not seen that. They nest all over the place, and they disproportionately nest in places that have particular kinds of vegetation structure, and they're not going to nest in water, obviously, but they are generally nesting on high ground, but we're not seeing them pick situations like you're talking about that much. No more than just random at least.
Because sandhills will do the same thing. We've seen those, and there'll be that little old patch because they build it up pretty high. And they're a little easier to spot because they're standing there 3.5 foot tall, and their kids are too.
I've got a pretty good idea what they like, though, like from a Kentucky perspective, because every spring, about the time where the farmers are ready to start that first cut of hay for the season, and I'm watching out of the lodge window, and I watch that batwing mower go through there. That's killing some turkeys right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a real concern. Some of the studies, like the Tennessee study, would be the closest to the Kentucky. There is work going on in Kentucky, but I haven't seen the results on it yet. The Tennessee study, about 7% of the landscape in their study, they would classify as nesting and brooding cover, which for one thing is a problem, right? That's not enough of the landscape. And that's consistent across studies. We are in single digits almost always. But in that study, 7% of the landscape is what they would consider nesting and brooding cover. 45%, I think, of the hens' nests were in that 7%. So that's what I'm talking about with that disproportionate selection of those areas. And of the nests that could be mowed over, 12% of the loss was because somebody mowed it.
I've seen it firsthand in Kentucky, looking out from the porch there.
Yeah.
When Rick and Timmy go to start mowing every year, and then them turkeys are just coming in, and all of a sudden you can just see it happens. I mean, they hit them, but especially that, and that's totally different than here, obviously, because that part of Kentucky where we are. Foothills, Appalachian Mountains, there's 3,000-ish foot elevation change, a couple thousand anyway, on my property alone, and it's real easy to find where they're nesting. I mean, that's not difficult at all. Well, initially it was. Now that we've done a bunch of habitat improvement, it's not the same anymore, because now where it used to be just oakwood savanna, now we've done a bunch of timber stand improvement, and we've actually got rabbits for the first time and foxes for the first time, and I think a lot of that cover that they like is also probably, now I'm seeing turkeys in places where I hadn't seen them before earlier in the year. So my suspicion is that because we let that light in the canopy, we've got that undergrowth and understory now that they like that stuff. So we're seeing, we've always had a good turkey population there, but it's crazy now. Like whatever reason, we did those improvements, and it really helped the turkey population. And that may be too a lack of predation there too, for whatever reason. I mean, we do have bobcats and we have other forms of predation, I believe, but I don't know. It just seems like the turkey population there is booming, especially bait. I mean, you've seen it. You've hunted there. You can't, I tell you what, and this is from several years now hunting that place. If you want to shoot a turkey, I can almost guarantee you by 10 o'clock on opening morning, you'll have a turkey killed. And we do youth hunts every year that we donate to the NWTF, and we bring those kids out. Only one time ever has a kid not successfully harvested a turkey on the farm because he couldn't come on the youth opener. He had to come 3 weeks later, and we had like 40-mile-an-hour winds for like 3 days straight, and the turkeys just did not move. That's the one and only time anybody's hunted the farm and not been successful hunting a turkey.
Don't be darned.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful right there. Well, I think, you alluded to it. That is a problem that we have across much of the range, and nesting cover is not as limiting generally as poult rearing cover. but I rarely go anywhere and see good poult root cover. And when I do, it's usually because they've opened up the woods and they're burning frequently. But I also have many anecdotes like that over again where I work with a lot of private landowners to help them manage for turkeys. And we have watched them turn that corner where they go in and aggressively change habitat on their land that's usually somewhere between 300 and 3,000 acres, just to give you an idea of the size of these properties. And it is very consistent when you get in there and start opening up the woods and get sunlight on the ground, and you're adding burning and starting to adjust your field management to be more productive. You can see a big response in the turkey population fast.
What does good poultry cover look like? What would be the correct vegetation height, thickness? Because I'm trying to picture.
Yeah, and it's hard to picture because it's also hard for me to find some to show you because there's just not that much.
Can't get there from here.
Which is my point. And I go on a lot of these private landowners, they don't have anywhere for me to show them because it literally doesn't exist on their property. So that'll give you some context. But to address your question directly, what Poults need is a Forb-dominated community. So what all that means is it's wildflowers. They're herbaceous, broadleaf plants. They have a flower. Some of them are really showy. Those are Forbs. Some of them are not so showy. They're, that is the principal component of the habitat that makes it high quality because it's producing food and structure that allows them to access that food. Now, you said another key thing that usually is not considered here, and that is height. So you need to think about what's going on here. We've got a bunch of poults that are, 4 to 7 or 8 inches tall. And then we have a hen that's a couple feet tall. So they also need different things structurally. So what you're trying to accomplish is you want that Forb canopy that's going to be over the top of the poults and protect them from above, from predation or exposure to the elements, so they can meander around underneath that plant community. It's bare soil otherwise underneath the plant community, right? You don't, if you walk through your yard with tennis shoes on at daylight, your feet are going to get wet, right? So we don't want that. So, but we also want those plants to be short enough that hen can walk around in it and see over the top, because she's primarily providing safety to them by being alert and seeing what's going on. And she needs to protect herself principally. So, that kind of community structure is what you're trying to achieve. And it's usually accomplished by having an open forest where you have plenty of sunlight getting in and it's been burned in the same year. So that's one place that poult rooting cover occurs frequently. And the other place would be in early succession or fields that are not dominated by a sod forming grass. So, if we have Bahia grass or fescue up in Kentucky or something like that, that is not good poult rearing cover, and it's planted in a lot of the space that otherwise could be good poult rearing cover.
Well, you said it a little bit ago about the broadleaf and the flowering and everything, and instantly in my head what I went to is what you explained is all the shit that I normally want to spray glyphosate on from a deer perspective.
Yeah.
It seems like the stuff that I'm trying to get rid of is exactly what they want.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of land uses we're trying to get rid of some of that stuff that would be good, and also aesthetically, when we've gotten there there's been a few landowners where it's almost comical, and he and I laugh together about it, because when I get him to where he needs to be on what that poult rearing cover actually looks like, he thinks, man, everybody's going to make fun of me. I'm not keeping up my farm. Like it looks kind of messy.
Soda apples would be great for them. Mama can look over them and the baby can hide under them, but God, no.
So, one thing that I have done a lot of, we're really active online, and even with our podcast, we put a lot of footage into the episodes trying to give people visually what does this actually look like and how do you accomplish it. So there, folks are interested. You can Google what is a Forb, and you'll see my mug pop up, because like we're putting out stuff like that because of exactly that question. People want to get this, but they don't even know what it looks like.
So with that in mind, do you know of a commercially available product that you could plant? Like, say, if you had a piece of property and you want to plant a field that's going to help out your poult, your turkeys be able to rear up. Is there something that's commercially available that you can, not say a food plot, but create an environment, create a field that's best?
An environment plot.
Let's address this in multiple ways. One, it can be accomplished without planting anything. All right. So, the open woods with fire can accomplish it pretty well. In fields, it's really about getting rid of grass. That's what it boils down to. Most of our openings have been converted into some sort of non-native pasture grass, and it's really about getting rid of that grass and taking time to get rid of some of our problematic weeds that might be there as well. And if you do that, you ultimately can get to good brood rearing cover without planting anything. So that's not necessary. We have some practices like USDA CRP practices. One of them is called the pollinator practice. I think it's CP42. That's a cost share that actually you can buy a lot of native forbs and plant that. Probably if you're going to go that route, you'd want to try to see if you qualify for one of those kind of programs, because that's expensive to plant native warm season forbs. That being said, some of the agricultural plants that we might use are forbs, and you might be able to accomplish a similar kind of structure. So think about things like soybeans or sunflowers, or I'm trying to think of some that are not vines. So like cowpeas or lab or something like that's not going to get you the structure you want. They're broadleaf, but they're, because of that vining habit, they're not very good for
What
structure.
about something like buckwheat?
Buckwheat's another excellent one. So those are forbs. They're buggy. You can find them commercially available, and if you manage them so that they're producing the kind of structure that I'm talking about, then they're probably producing pretty good brooding cover. That's actually one of the things that we're testing this year in our Poult imprinting work. We have native plantings of all sorts of arrangements in terms of how much grass and forb dominance there is. And then we have a mix that we're trying to put together, like a food plot mix, to test that against those to see, if we can come up with something that would be an easy thing for folks to plant. And also a lot of the plants that we would be using overlap 100% in most cases with what you might plant for deer. So, you could come up with a mix potentially to accomplish both objectives at the same time. That being said, one thing that I really like, and I've put out a bunch of media on this, I have a couple of videos walking people through this step by step, but you can take my favorite to do. It may not work as well in South Florida, but it works across a large portion of the South. I really love crimson clover and a cereal grain like wheat or oats, and sometimes I do both. And I would plant that in the fall, just like you normally do. Normally, you've got weed problems if you haven't dealt with it. So I usually would start with crimson only, and anything that grows in there that's grass is not supposed to be there. So take care of it. So that's the advantage of starting there. But once you get through those weed issues, you can plant crimson and wheat or crimson and oats. And I'm thinking about like a 20-pound rate of crimson and a 30-pound rate of wheat. So it's a little bit light on the cereal grain. I don't really want that structurally to be dominant. The clover is better, but both of them are senescing at the right time in the spring where a lot of native forbs can colonize. And what you end up with in that case is this really attractive food plot during the fall and winter when you're trying to hunt deer. And then it's really attractive when turkeys are strutting and you're trying to shoot one. And then it transitions beyond that into pretty good poultry cover if you've taken those steps to make sure that you're getting native forbs colonizing instead of some of our problematic plants, and particularly problematic grasses.
And that was going to be my next question. Is it possible to have a recreational track that is conducive to both deer and turkey? But I think you just answered that. That's where I was going with that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'd say every landowner that comes to me, most of them are all over turkey. Like they're eat up with it. But also they hunt deer, so they want both. But sort of rank turkey first. And you can absolutely do great work on that property to enhance both at the same time. So there are some practices that might not overlap perfectly, but a lot of it's sort of like what you do for turkeys is a little bit narrower than what you would do for deer. So all the practices that we would implement for turkeys generally are going to benefit deer also. And there's some add-on practices that we might do in addition to benefit deer that aren't necessarily translating to turkey productivity.
Well, one thing down here also, when you start talking about getting rid of those evil grasses like Bahia, a lot of our turkey hunting is done on a cow ranch. And the turkey is secondary to the overall use of that property. And whether he's secondary or tertiary with the deer, however you want to look at it, we deer and turkey hunt, but it's a cattle ranch. And a lot of this stuff, we're not going to be able to fence off little spots.
That's right.
The cows go walking off into the bay head to cool off just like the deer do. So in a hunting specific place like our place in Georgia, we don't have any cows. It's the only place I've ever been that you don't have to open a gate to go into. It's very strange. But we can look towards our deer and our turkey populations. But a lot of this South Central Florida, you're turkey hunting on a working cattle ranch.
That's
and
right.
That makes some of that stuff, you start talking about planting clover and all for your turkeys, my brain's over here going, yeah, that ain't going to work. Clearly it would, and it would be best for the turkey population, but we're sort of...
You have a competing objective.
Correct. And a primary competing objective.
Yeah, you're on working lands, and that's ranking supreme. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a thriving turkey population in that scenario. A lot of those ranches have exceptional turkey populations.
Oh, yes.
And particularly in that case, what you're doing in terms of a turkey production standpoint, you're much more reliant on woods. So you can produce high quality nesting and brooding cover in the woods or in the fields. But in a case like that pasture grass, especially when it's being intensively grazed, is not producing high quality of either of those things, but you can have that in the woods. Another thing that I think is really important, this is something that's kind of right off hot off the press in our South Florida work, where it was really obvious. Turkeys live by their eyes. So as an adult turkey, being able to see is a really important thing. And one thing that my lab has kind of led the effort on that is definitely a big concern across the range of turkeys, and we think might be one of the causative problems for some of these turkey declines, is hen survival. So I'm talking about an adult turkey now. And what we have seen in some of these ranches down there is that the productivity, so the nesting and brooding, is not very good or is average in a lot of those landscapes, but the hen survival is very high. So that vital rate is the most important thing to the turkey population. Hens have to live long enough to reproduce. And, if you think about that, if we take a hen and her average lifespan is 2 years, and then we take another hen and her average lifespan is 8 years, that is a far different scenario in terms of her lifetime potential productivity, right? So maybe in that landscape, the nesting and brooding success isn't, maybe it's 25% less, but if she's living 3 times as long, she's still more successful over her lifetime. So, that hen survival is driving the population principally first. And what we have seen in South Florida on some of those ranches is that the hen survival is really high, even though the productivity isn't. And what you end up with is an abundant, thriving turkey population, or at least stable population.
And there's like Kentucky, for example, and I think Georgia may be the same way. Can you shoot a hen during the fall?
Never.
No, right.
Never.
So Kentucky you can, and there's
You
other
can't shoot a
states you
gobbler
can.
in the fall.
Right. So I was leading into that question with that when you were talking about hen survival, right? What about these states that like Kentucky, for example, I can shoot a hen in the fall, and that turkey hunters argue about that like crazy.
Most of my lifetime, you could shoot them. Not most. My early lifetime, you could shoot hens and toms in the fall, but then only toms in the spring.
Right.
That came later to where they were absolutely no go, and that's made a big difference. Our population is way better than it was 30 years ago.
Well, and that's where I was going with how is that, those states that do allow, that hen take, especially in the fall time. Of course, you can't take them at all in the spring. No state that I know of anyway.
Unless she's got a beard.
Right. But how does that affect overall population, from a vast geographic region? I'm not talking about just, this little area here, but from an overall perspective, is it better not to take hens, or is it better to, you still need to manage them and you still need to take some here and there? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it doesn't really work like deer, where, we're trying to manage the female population. So I think it's actually an interesting history. We started hunting turkeys in the fall, and it over time shifted to spring turkey hunting, which a lot of people don't even realize that. But hunting them, pointing them and flushing them and shooting them in the fall was where people started with that, and that was a strong part of the culture, especially in the Northeast and some places in the Midwest. And you still see that now in current, regulations where, like, for example, Pennsylvania, we've talked to the state coordinator there, and we were kind of shocked by the level of participation in fall hunting versus spring, because it's so far different from what we see in the South. But that's a really important part of the culture there. So what we have found, I guess, is that hen survival is regulating populations, and it doesn't matter if the hen dies in the spring or the fall. If you're in a place where hen survival is a problem, then you probably wouldn't want to have additional mortality because of hunting. That being said, even in the places like Pennsylvania or some of these other places where it's a really common practice, at the state level, the percentage of hens that are being harvested is basically minuscule. We're talking about a 1 or 2% harvest rate or something on the overall hen population. So it's usually really, really low. Where that could matter, though, I think it was Sean that just said you're not talking about at the local scale, but that actually is where it could matter. If you shoot, if everybody decides to take a hen on your farm, that could be a real problem in your local population because the percentage of hens that you're taking is now higher. Now, with all that being said, in some of the populations where we're seeing a steep decline, the hen survival might already be down in the 40-50% range. That is already such low hen survival that it cannot the production of turkeys cannot overcome hen survival being so low. So then, you obviously would not want to be taking hens in that context when, the population is already being limited by this low hen survival.
And is that mostly due to predation or something else?
That's a great question. This is the $1 million question, isn't it? Or maybe more than that, actually. I forgot. We are working on that, what the value of turkeys is to Florida. It's a lot. I can tell you that.
Let me stop you right there for just a second. You've got a weird light coming from the window that's shining on your face,
Right through your blinds.
and it's going to look crazy on the video. Yeah.
Now it was in the middle of his
Is that okay if I do that?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's
Nope, now you're in the other.
there you go. That's perfect right there. Sorry, that was just going to look
Sorry,
funky
guys.
when I cut the video. I can't. I mean, I can fix a lot of shit, but I can't fix that.
This, my granddaddy used to tell me the sun shines on a dog's ass every once in a while.
100%.
Every once in a while.
Gospel.
Hen survival. What was the question?
Predation.
Predation, is that
predation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there predation, man, this is the thing that everybody gets heated about, and I get attacked a lot about this because there's nuance and people don't like that.
How so?
People love broad
When you-
strokes.
When you go and look at the data from any study, predation is going to be the proximate cause of mortality in every life stage. That'll be the leading cause. Okay?
What? Say that again.
The proximate cause. So, like, if you say, "Oh, I found this dead hen," we're going to say it was predation that was the proximate cause. So we know a predator got her. But the problem is that there's nuance on what the ultimate cause of that is. And what I mean by that is, yeah, hens get eaten. Predators eat hens. Everybody knows that. I'm not disputing that. That's obvious, right? That doesn't mean that there are too many predators necessarily. It could. That's one option. But also predators catch the ones that they can catch. So that hen could have also been sick. Well, now the proximate cause is different than the ultimate cause. The ultimate cause is we've got a bunch of hens that have some sort of disease and they're sick and they're getting eaten by a predator. Right? So which one's the problem there? The predator or the disease? You see what I'm saying? So the ultimate and proximate are not the same. The same is true for habitat. If we have poor habitat quality and we're forcing a hen to nest in a parking lot and then she gets eaten by a coyote because she's nesting in a parking lot, is it the coyote or is it the parking lot? Right? Like predation is the leading proximate cause, but it doesn't actually tell us what the ultimate cause is.
And how much does habitat loss play into that?
So we've got work right now that's in review, and I think it's very strong. We put Florida data together with Tennessee and Oklahoma, so we have 3 subspecies represented. And one thing that was really clear in that study is that the vegetation quality around nest sites was dramatically influencing the probability that the hen died during nesting. So that tells me that the vegetation quality is the problem. Now, the other problem here is as you increase, or let's say it a different way, as you decrease the quality of habitat for turkeys, you're also simultaneously increasing the habitat quality for several predators. So there's also that, we're kind of treating them as separate things. And I'm telling you, that the symptom doesn't necessarily indicate the cause, but also the symptom and the cause are related to one another. Because the vegetation that's making it poor for turkeys is also making it good for coyotes. So that's why I'm saying there's more nuance and it's complex. And based on our data that we've collected so far, habitat is one of the problems. And principally, if you improve nesting habitat, the reason that it improves it is because it decreases predation. Now, the question is, how much are you going to gain out of predator suppression? Which could be accomplished by some of this habitat work. Also, we could decrease abundance of some of these predators strictly by managing habitat quality for turkeys. but also we could implement a predator removal program. And we have an ongoing project right now focused on that, like predator removal. What are you going to get out of it? For the average landowner, is that something that you should add to your management? We literally, on turkeys, have almost no data where we can speak to that. And that's where folks get mad at me, because I think it's important for you to realize that this isn't just as simple as we need to go catch some raccoons.
Right.
And I can't even tell you based on data, which is my job as a scientist to do, what should you expect if you focus on predator removal. We don't have any data on it. So now we've got a project. We have it 10 or 12 sites replicated all over the eastern United States, where we are implementing in a robust experimental design predator removal versus not doing predator removal, to see what do you gain from that in the turkey population. So we will have those results soon.
If you go back to your each baby turkey has to eat 1,000 bugs a day.
4.
Each baby coyote and baby bobcat have to eat so many ounces or pounds of flesh a day, and eat one less coyote is back to they have to eat a certain amount. Less predators means less predation.
Yeah, I've never been involved in a hunting club where a deer hunting club where there were turkey hunters, where I was not told that you shoot every
damn bobcat,
every bobcat you see. You shoot. Yeah, it's the common theme.
And let me be very clear: if y'all want to shoot the coyotes and bobcats, you be my guest. I don't care what, and go trap. It's fun. I think it's a great way to get involved and be, involved in land management on your land. And some people might not have another option. If you're leasing land, you can't go out there and do a bunch of forest management if if it's industrial timberland. So, I'm not steering people away from that at all, but I am telling you that there's no data for me to base anything on for you. So that's where people will get irritated with me. And, that's the problem, is it seems so intuitive and simplistic that, well, if we have one less coyote, then we get more
Might
turkeys.
save a baby turkey. Yeah.
But at the other hand, the other side of that coin, that coyote's doing his job by catching a sick turkey.
Potentially. So you could end up, yeah. And another problem with coyotes particularly, which I find really fascinating, I've put a bunch of tags on those. I have some working with another professor here at the UF, where we have some down in your neck of the woods right now that have tags on them. And a problem with coyotes, well, let me give you an anecdote from North Carolina in one of our studies. We tagged coyotes on Fort Bragg military installation, which is sort of on the South Carolina, North Carolina border. And within 2 months, one of those coyotes was in Washington, D.C.
What?
That's 900 miles.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Who would have thought?
Like,
Was
that's
it a
crazy.
male that got run off of his pack, or?
No, it was an adult female.
Wow, I'll be darned.
But here's my point of that. They're operating at such an enormous scale, and we've seen it actually on our project down in Central Florida. The other guy, Hans Ellington, that's leading that project, has shown me this in the data, and it's so remarkable. When you plot out everybody's home range, they have really defined edges. So you can see, oh, this is Coyote A and Coyote B, and they meet right here, and they don't cross that, right? They're defending territories. And you'll have a pair generally doing that. And then you'll have these other coyotes, it's about 30% of them roughly, that we'd call a transient. And you look at this data, and it doesn't make any sense. It's just bouncing around all over the place. There's no defined home range. And that's interesting from multiple points of view. One thing, he took that data and he said, yeah, we didn't catch the coyote right here because there was this defined home range because we had everybody around it, but nobody would go in there. So he's like, we need to go set a trap in there to get that one, whoever's defending that home range. So he was able to say definitively that we didn't catch that one. But the other thing that has happened a couple of times now is we'll have a defined home range like that, and then that individual gets killed by a hunter. And then within days, somebody else is now in that home range.
And do they and then does the replacement then defend that home range after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could draw several things from that. One problem, it's been demonstrated out in the West to some degree, but there still needs to be more work on it. Those coyotes are really good at keeping other coyotes out. So if you remove them, you could potentially, at least for a short duration, increase the number of coyotes by doing that. Two, the replacement rate from these transients appears to be so crazy fast that, that you may have very little discontinuity in predation, right? Because they're operating at such a big scale.
Unless all your neighbors are shooting everyone they see too, it's not doing any good
Right,
for you to do it.
and then we may as well just go ahead and increase it to the state level, because we might have one from Alabama tomorrow.
So we talked about coyotes, but what about bobcats? Because you always hear, that's to say that in hunt camp, everybody talks about bobcat predation. Are they more effective?
Yeah, bobcats, in our work, bobcats are, well, when we're having to use field evidence to figure out what it is, and it's pretty obvious when it's a bobcat because they usually cache it. They like bury it under some leaf litter and stuff, and so there's some things about the field evidence that are easy to identify, but a lot of them it's hard to figure out exactly what it is. But of the ones that we were fairly certain of what happened to the turkey, we're about 50-50. So about half of them bobcat and about half of them coyote. That being said, when we were just talking about the problems with coyote trapping, that's not nearly as problematic with bobcats. They are smaller. They're not as good with immigrating, and you probably could have more success keeping that predation relatively low.
I've watched them firsthand. We cut that video a couple years ago from what's now the staffing plot from that tower when I was hunting muzzleloader with Paul. And, we had that big group of turkeys come out and work its way up the logging road. And Paul's like, what the hell is that down there? And I got the binos out. I'm like, oh, shit, that's a bobcat. And we watched this cat just sneak along this logging road and just follow him. Then boom, turkeys everywhere. And this damn thing comes back trotting in the food plot with a turkey in its mouth.
I'll be darned.
He had caught a 50 cal round if I'd have been sitting there.
I was trying to get him to send it, but he wouldn't on account. He thought that
pretty
was
cool to see, though.
It was like 300 yards, so
Still send it.
you can't kill one if you don't send it. But it was neat to see that, and we've killed some bobcats, but we don't see them nearly as often as we do coyotes in Kentucky.
Really?
Yeah. No, we see
I'm the exact opposite in Georgia. I see bobcats, I wouldn't say every sit, but a lot of sits. But I've seen one coyote all season.
What about what's Georgia? I've never.
Plenty on camera, though.
So kind of hit or miss, either one. And for us down here, this far south in Florida at least, that piece of property that we hunt in Georgia, we bought in 1989. And the first night we were ever on the place, I heard my first coyote in my life. And I thought, what in the hell is that? Well, we didn't have coyotes in Okeechobee, Florida. They just didn't exist. And now you see them killed on the side of the road.
Oh, yeah.
Every few days you'll see another one. You can hear them at night. And they just flat weren't this far south. And now, over the course of time, again, it's just non-scientific, my observation in the woods, I haven't seen an overall, oh my God, back then we had 10,000 turkeys per acre and now we have 2. I haven't noticed from my childhood until now an overall difference in the population of the turkeys based on this warp speed population growth from 0 to a lot on the coyotes. So for whatever that's worth.
Well, they definitely eat them, and we talked about some of the nuance with that. They also eat a ton of small mammals and berries and insects and all kinds of stuff.
And armadillos.
Yeah.
We don't have as many armadillos as we did as kids because I think the coyotes dig them up and eat them.
Well, maybe that's a good thing because,
they ain't supposed to be here either.
Armadillos are commonly implicated in nests. So, so, that's another thing that is a complexity here where it doesn't mean, if we kill a coyote, we're going to get more turkeys. Another problem is that the predator community are competing with each other. And they're actually not with turkeys, but with some other species. There are some examples where we went in and removed a predator, and because it was a really good competitor, with a different predator, what we'd call that is a release. So we remove one predator or impair that predator community, and then the other one becomes more abundant. And sometimes that's a problem if that other one is more problematic for your target species. So let's say hypothetically, this is completely hypothetical, I'm not saying this would happen, but if you removed coyotes and that made bobcats become more abundant, then bobcats might be better at killing turkeys than coyotes, and that would be a problem, right? You could actually make it worse, and we have observed that in some systems. So that's my whole point is, yes, predators eat turkeys, and what we can do about it is a different question. What are we going to get out of targeting these things that eat nests or eat hens versus what are we going to get out of these habitat management things that also principally work because they decrease predation? And then what do you get out of them when you do them together, which I think is where the rubber really meets the road, because in the quail world, where we've done pretty good research with this, it's very clear that it's a habitat first, then predator removal on top of that can augment it. So you can gain a lot from removing predators, but that's only if you have good habitat conditions in place. And I'll remind you about turkeys with poults. There's probably a lot of similarities there, because poults have lots of reasons to die, and if you don't have good vegetation structure, they're going to die from something different because of exposure or lack of insect abundance. So we're probably operating in a similar thing with turkeys, where it has to be habitat first, and you probably can gain from predator removal at some level on top of that.
What about predatory birds? What about hawks and caracaras?
You're not allowed to shoot those, Mike.
Well, I know you're not allowed to shoot them, but I mean, as far as the effectiveness and predation of poults, is that something you have data on?
Yeah. A lot of the poult literature suggests that avian predators are the primary problem, although other things eat them. I'll just put it that way. So that's the one problem. Your only way to deal with that legally is to try to create conditions where they're not vulnerable to those avian predators, because we can't trap them or do anything about it. So, and a lot of those populations have been increasing over time. We have pretty good data on raptor populations, and a lot of species have been increasing over time.
Takes me back to when I was a kid, and Betty Lou used to tell us, boys, the more white on it, the more it costs.
You just invoked my podcast.
I did.
Wow.
Yeah, well, when I was younger, I fractured an occasional law.
Yeah.
But I've got a question for you. So from specifically Osceolas, what is the population of Osceolas look like right now? Are we on an uptick? Are we on a severe decline? What's the generalization for Osceolas right now?
Yeah, I would say based on our data, we actually had a paper just come out that I've started talking about now that it's vetted, that I think is a really important message just to the turkey community in general, but especially for Osceola country. We looked at the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which, a lot of private landowners are participating in that. A lot of these ranches that we were talking about earlier, and there's a lot of public land, and it's strategically being implemented from the Everglades all the way up to Georgia and across the Panhandle, so that we have connected undeveloped land that's usable for turkeys. And what we found in that study, we did it statewide, and we used various types of data. One of them was the poult per hen data that FWC collects. So just a note for folks out there, you can help us collect data, and that is being used for stuff that's important like this. During June, July, and August, we have a brood survey. So if you see turkeys with a brood, you can go to their app and put it in that as an observation. And then we took that data and looked statewide to see what does the population look like in terms of its, general function. And what we found is inside the corridor, especially in South Florida and Osceola range, that population was relatively stable. They were relatively abundant and stable. And outside the corridor, which you can imagine why this would be, they were not. they were doing really poorly, and in some cases just completely absent. You think about some of the city centers. Obviously, they can't handle that, but it was a really important thing because it's showing you how important it is to have habitat connectivity. And I think because of that, we've seen really stable turkey populations relative to populations in a lot of other places. So that, I think is a positive thing. Turkeys in South Florida have all kinds of things going wrong for them, right? They're in a peninsula, so they're geographically restricted. And then there's a lot of development pressure and all sorts of things going on. But thankfully, we have that coordinated effort. It's been going on since the 90s that has really helped to stabilize populations. Now, that being said, different places within the Osceola range are doing different things. If you look at the poult per hen data, the reproduction success is relatively low down there. And we talked about that earlier. That might be because of some of the competing land use interests. But, they also simultaneously might have really high hen survival for some of the same reasons. So, the population's remaining stable because of that. And we actually saw this in a study that we just completed. One of them right there north of you guys, and the other one about an hour south of you. When we looked at those populations, one of them was relatively stable, but the limiting factor was poult survival, and the other population had really poor hen survival, and it was not doing well because of the hen survival. So there's variation in what is driving populations, and that's why you see some differences in different parts of their range.
And that's where I was kind of going with that too. We're for the most part we're high and dry here, comparatively speaking to south of the lake. You get down the Immokalee, and then you get into the Everglades and places like that. So my suspicion is that the population in the Everglades probably isn't what it is here, but I'm not so sure now. Before we had this conversation, I would have almost bet my bottom dollar on it, but I'm not so sure now.
Well, there's a lot of variation, and it's not as easy as just a latitude thing. The place that we were working, the landscape was not nearly as open. The grazing and burning, those two things in particular that keep the landscape relatively open, I'd say that's one principal reason that prescribed fire is so beneficial to turkeys, is because it keeps the landscape open and high visibility. In that landscape where those two practices that generally keep the land relatively open, the hen survival was poor because the visibility was poor. And in the other landscape, the studies are going on at the same time. They're not far apart. The other landscape, there's frequent burning and grazing, and the landscape's being managed that way. In neither case, the poult rearing success was high. But in that other population, the hen survival was among the highest ever reported. So, that's kind of giving you a view of how what's being done on the landscape could really change how the population's functioning. We literally, just 2 hours apart, have a completely different concern with what's regulating the population.
Yeah, and we're in a unique position too at Florida with the Osceolas. To me, I grew up here. You grew up here. Hunting in Osceola. Okay, grew up on the ranch, and they were fairly easy to hunt as a kid. Yeah, dime a dozen, like you say. But talking to our friends that live north, and all these other people that we met over the years now with Saltlick, the Osceola turkey is like one of the most coveted things ever. Like people
we're the only ones that've got them.
Lose their shit over an Osceola.
Everywhere you go and everyone you meet out of the state of Florida. Oh, do you have access to Osceolas? Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Mike and I just attended Safari Club International in Nashville, and that was the question that came up. It seemed
you
like
guys are from South Florida?
Yeah.
Can you get me on the Osceola?
That's every single. Hey, do you have? We can swap something out. We can do something if you can get me on a bird.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jump back real quick. You may not have the data on it yet because it seems like it's a relatively new issue in the state of Florida. Get up in a small plane and take off it's shocking how much of our landscape is now covered with solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any data yet, or do y'all have any data yet of what that 1,000 acres now being in solar panels? It's still got its bay heads around it, and it still would look like a pasture, but for the fact that it's covered with solar panels. Do you have any data yet on how that affects, helps, hurts turkey population in general?
To my knowledge, there has been no data collected on that. I haven't collected any, but we could make some predictions, we'll call them, based on how it changes the landscape. That's better than the parking lot. I can tell you that. That I could see a circumstance where you could manage it so that it's actually quite beneficial because it could produce nesting and brooding cover. But obviously it's treeless, so we're going to have that limitation where you don't have any roost sites. But if it's, I would say that it is probably not as good as managing it in some other ways that would be more conducive to turkey productivity, but it's not worst case scenario either. So we're probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you put your county commissioner hat on when you asked that
I
question?
did not put my county commissioner hat on. I put my I hate solar panels
Oh,
hat
okay,
on.
that's fair.
Nothing to do with county commissioner.
Well, I think that is something that's worthwhile looking at because they're going up left and right, and they're certainly going to play a role here.
I got on a plane with a buddy of mine to fly up to our place in Georgia last year, and I live here, and I drive the roads, and I was shocked. We hit the air, and I looked down. I said, "Clint, where in the hell did all these solar panels come from?" He's like, "Sumner, it's been every time I go up, there's more of them." And you kind of don't see it from the ground, but boy, when you get up there in the air, it's shocking.
Just north of Gainesville, when we went for the end of the year
all
trip,
that, yeah.
everything on the west side of 75, I'm like, holy shit, when did this happen?
Yep.
And I'm maybe because we go so early to drive up there, I don't see it because it's dark. But man, I was shocked by the solar panels just there, just in Alachua County alone. Good Lord.
Yeah, they're definitely popping up.
So I want to get into some regional differences, if you don't mind. Specifically, looking from a South Florida perspective to South Georgia to Appalachian Kentucky, and then even to call it Northern Ohio. And what are and there's got to be, to me, and I've seen it in the birds in Kentucky especially. There's some behavioral differences between these birds. Can you talk about that a little bit and what to expect? So if you've got somebody that's coming from flatland here in South Florida, you bring them up to a place like, well, even South Georgia, at your farm, there you've got quite a bit.
Dumped it off in little piles.
There's quite a, and you hunt those birds differently too. From a hunting perspective, you don't chase them the same way you do here.
And there's all kinds of good wives' tales. They won't cross the fence. They won't cross the water.
They won't come downhill.
They won't come downhill, and it's all bullshit. I've killed them.
Well, I don't think there's anything left for me to say.
Yeah.
Well, but nobody's going to listen to him. They want to hear it from you. Unless you got a PhD recently that I didn't know about.
No, but I've chased a few turkeys in that stuff, and yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this. I wish I knew the number of turkeys that I have put a GPS on and followed them around. And I don't know how many that is, but it's a lot of them. And I've done it in a bunch of different places, and they still surprise me. So there's a lot of things going on, and forgive me, I can't remember who said it earlier, but somebody said that they all have their own personality. I cannot tell you how true that is. I have lived in here with a bunch of turkeys where we have them right over here, not far from me, and I go visit them all the time, and I have a close connection with those turkeys, and that is the truth. They have very different personalities from one another, and it's really interesting and fun to be a part of that. And one of my students is actually working on that. We're trying to figure out how to classify personalities and,
Good luck.
Their intelligence and how well they can remember things and all sorts of cool stuff that the hunting community talk about, but we don't actually have any data on. That being said, they definitely have some behaviors that are really consistent, and I'd say those behaviors are things that are really important to them. So, for example, what good nesting cover looks like and the relative selection for that is consistent. Same thing with poult rearing cover, right? We've got the same type of structure. It might be a different suite of plants driving that structure. It may be a different set of practices that you use to achieve having that cover, but the general structural characteristics are the same. There's also, like with roosting, for example, they do have some, we'll call them tendencies, where most turkeys tend to pick certain characteristics of roost sites, and you generally see traditional roost sites where you'll have turkeys roost a lot, and a lot of different turkeys will use that roost site, and they're in different places on the landscape. They're not just doing that randomly, but what they're choosing might be quite different in terms of those characteristics. For example, in South Florida, we've got these wetlands, that have hardwoods right around them, and often the roosting will be concentrated around those little patches of hardwoods, right? We see that a lot in the data, and that makes a lot of sense for multiple reasons. One, there's a lot of open landscape that doesn't have many trees in it, and there might be some pine flatwoods or something, and generally we're going to see them on that transition between the hardwoods. But you get up into the southern Appalachians, and everywhere's hardwoods, right? So now the characteristics of where they're choosing to roost might be different, like what that underlying thing is, but you still see places that are really attractive at roost. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but the environment, like they do have characteristics that they're looking for these different behavior, but the environment is kind of shaping what that suite of characteristics looks like.
Sure, and I'll use an example. We'll use Kentucky for example. So on my farm, let's say I've got, I don't know, let's call it 1 million white oaks and 500,000 red oaks, and I've got 100 pine trees. You can bet your ass that you'll find a roosted turkey in a damn pine tree. I have no idea why, but
They're open. They
right.
can see from up there.
The cover is exactly the same on the ground, right? There's nothing that is different than another place, but by God,
that pine tree is sparse.
So when we do roost birds occasionally, you can bet your ass they're going to find a pine tree, and that's where they're going.
You know what's funny about that?
Yeah.
When I was hunting in Alabama, and just outside Monroeville, I was at part of a club there for years, and I'd sit there deer hunting and watch them roost in pine trees pretty much every day. And then I can't remember who it was telling me they will not roost in a pine tree. And I said, well, maybe you don't have pine trees where you're hunting, But I said, I've watched them do it, I said,
but if you're in Fort Gaines, Georgia, and it's 500 acres of planted pine trees,
they're roosting in pine trees.
you might find them. You might find them in a cypress tree down on the creek bottom.
Yeah, or a live oak or something.
I think one thing that that's going on here is, with the pine tree, as that pine tree ages, it sort of like hits a glass ceiling, and it starts to look like a mushroom. Have you ever noticed this? Probably. So the limbs start getting more lateral, and when there's been some studies looking at roost site selection of individual trees and what characteristics that they're choosing, and one of the things is, that lateral limb, that you start to see in pine trees that are old. So one thing, if you're in a pine plantation where all the pines are 22 years old, they're plenty big enough for a turkey to roost in, but the structure of that canopy might not be what they're looking for, as opposed to going on the edge of a wetland in the south where you've got a bunch of black gum, and that is known for its branching pattern where the limbs are really lateral flat. So some of it might literally be tree characteristics like that, especially, if you get up in the mid-south and you have some of those scattered pine trees that are really old in there, that might be a really desirable tree in that context then. Whereas if you're in a pine plantation where all the trees are 22 years old, it might be way more desirable to be in that black gum on the edge of the creek down there. So some of that is going on as well. And we've collected data and multiple studies to show that there are some characteristics, and which tree species is providing it in different contexts changes.
Well, and like where Dad used to hunt with Sonny out there in Texas, rest his soul, lost him last week. They have no trees, and the turkeys roost on power lines.
That's right.
You got all
They're
this
not,
sorry little scrub. The turkeys.
it's really
right
important
there on
not
the
to
power line
roost on the
roost.
ground.
Yeah.
So a power line's better than the ground.
Well, one thing I'll ask too that I've made an observation over the years now with that Kentucky farm is how much does elevation play into to where they roost? So consider the base elevation there for us down in the bottom of the hollers is probably 600 to 700 feet above sea level, and then the peaks and the ridges are 25 to 3,000 feet. The vast majority of the birds, not only that have roosted, but that we've hunted successfully and that I've seen, are always on top, or maybe not first bench down, maybe not necessarily all the way on top. I don't think I've ever found them
roosting in the bottom.
roosting in the bottom. I don't think
They'll
I've ever
roost
seen
in
it.
the bottoms in Georgia. Now we don't have that elevation difference. We might be 300 or 400 feet, but they may roost all the way at the tippy top, or they may be roosting right down there.
And my only suspicion with that is because their eyesight is so good, they like the ability to be able to see longer distances. And man, those things will pitch off and they'll fly. They'll go right to the bottom of the holler too. Sometimes, depending when they pitch. I mean, they're not going to necessarily come to the top and stay in that food plot. They'll pitch, several hundred yards or 1,000 yards in some cases, all the way down there. And is that just a weird thing that I'm seeing there, or does elevation play come into play there?
Elevation's definitely one of those environmental characteristics, right, that plays a big role. There's been some really good data collected over the years up in your neck of the woods, West Virginia and Virginia in particular, where they were looking to see where turkeys choosing relative to slopes. And it's been a minute since I looked at these things, but I want to say that it was about they tend to choose an elevation about 3/4 of the way up. So it wasn't all the way at the tip top, but it was higher than in the middle, and they tend to pick. Now I can't remember which slope, but they also have a slope aspect that they prefer.
From an angle perspective, or from a directional
like
perspective?
they like west slopes or east slopes more, and I can't remember now. Forgive me, my memory's not perfect, but I can't remember now which one.
They like to see the sun either come up on them or go down behind them.
Well, the suspicion would be that, especially in the morning times, they'd want to pitch off to an east-facing slope so they get that sun coming up. That would be my guess.
It'd be their first look at the sun.
Right.
Yeah, I don't remember now, but I do remember that slope was important, and we did an episode on it a while back, and we had the paper linked in it, so I could find it real fast. But I don't remember which slope it was, but that was definitely an important thing driving selection. That doesn't mean that turkeys never roost on the other slopes, right, or never at the top or the bottom, but they definitely have tendencies where they tend to select particular slopes and particular places on the slope, whereas some of the studies, a lot of the ones that I'm have been more involved with, when we're in flatter ground like southern coastal plain, they tend to select closer to wet areas, so they tend to be in the bottom, so to speak. So we did a study in North Carolina in Lonely Pine. It's sort of the northern remnants of Lonely Pine, and in that system, the roosting was concentrated around the creeks in that case. There's been some work in Mississippi showing that it was over wetlands. That's where they were concentrated. In Florida, our stuff seems to indicate that they're usually on the edge of stream heads, or these little circular wetlands that are distributed out through a lot of the landscape. So, they have different characteristics they're selecting in these different areas, but there's definitely pretty strong selection.
And Dr. Lashley, do you think any of that could be population historical knowledge? Do they tend to do what their parents did? Could it be that this particular area, they like to be in the bottoms because for generations that's what their mamas and daddies had done? Is that a learned trait or?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing to ponder. It's really hard to detangle what is learned versus what's innate.
Right.
Some of it may be, if everybody for generations survived better when they did that, then that could just be, you're selecting over time for that trait to be innate in the population. So they just naturally do it and they don't even have a reason why. But some of that could also be that that's where their mama did it. Right.
And their mama's mama. And
I can't speak to that with data, but I can with Poults with data tell you a little bit about that. So let me just tell you kind of in a story framework. When we started the Poult imprinting stuff this past spring, we had a nest, that a hen got killed on the nest, and we were able to save those eggs and bring them to this facility, and we incubated them for 28 days. And when they hatched, we imprinted them on me, so they think I'm mama. And so once they hatch, for the first 3 days or so of their life, they are not really eating much. They are mainly getting their energy from the absorbed yolk sac. So, and there's a lot of reasons why that would be, but one reason is they don't know what they're doing, right? They, like, at first, we're kind of handing them insects and trying to get them to eat. And they, at first, the first day, they don't even know to try to eat. And then you sort of coax them into that over the first couple of days. So I really thought, based on that, these little guys are being taught by the hen how to eat. That's not innate. That's something she's teaching them. And it seemed like that in the first few days. And Lovett Williams, who was one of the historical researchers in Florida that did all that work at Fish Eating Creek down there near you guys, he talked about a lot of this kind of thing with hens. So basically, he had hens that he would go and set up a blind and watch them during the nesting process. And he noted in one of his books that when the poults hatched, that she would hand them insects, like she'd catch a grasshopper and give it to them, and do that for the first few days. So we were trying to mimic that, right? And then on day 3, they get introduced to where they're going to be foraging. And I will shit you not, when that first little poult, when its feet hit the ground, it turned into a velociraptor. I could not believe it. As soon as its feet hit the ground, it is now in kill mode. And everything that moves that it can catch and swallow, it's running around. I mean, it was just amazing to me. It really felt like Jurassic Park, in that classic scene with the velociraptors and all. That is what it looked like when we put them into that treatment. I just could not believe it. It was like instinctual. Immediately they know what to do, and they ran around and caught all the grasshoppers and were doing all this stuff. And it was just so different from the couple of days before that. It's etched into my brain. But in this case, it confused me, because now I'm like, well, some things are innate and some things apparently are learned. And now we're really trying, I have a student focused on this, trying to figure out what is learned and what's innate, and how much does that matter to what's going on in these populations. Another example of something that's innate, when they see a grasshopper, they're going to eat it, right? If they see a spider, if they can catch it and swallow it, it's going down. You put a little fuzzy caterpillar in there, and they will literally like gag at the sight of it. They instinctively know you don't eat fuzzy caterpillars. and we have video footage of them like seeing one for the first time, and it literally looks like they're going to vomit, where they just are like so grossed out by the idea of it. So like that's clearly
That's
innate.
amazing.
Wow. I knew a girl like that once.
So that's the way that they treat me most of the time.
Back to Oscar on Friday night.
Oh, see, I tried to take it away. I should have never. I ammed him. I should have never.
I should have said that was. I should have said Sumner saw that all the time. And you,
Yeah,
when he
too
went
late.
out at night.
And untrue, as it turns out.
I just keep seeing semen everywhere.
I'm
now.
sorry. Doc.
Well, it's kind of cool. The hen has this little apparatus. I forgot the name of it. It's got some kind of fancy name, but it's like a nursery for sperm. Basically, she gets them in there and can
And it
nurse
stays
them.
motile and lives for 60 days.
Yeah, at least 60. Yeah,
Man,
Bizarre.
Gosh, I'm
and that's all we know about it. We don't really know what else to what's the function. Obviously, sperm storage is important for some reason.
could that be like an environmental thing? Like, say it's raining like crazy, and she's going to hold off just to get to a drier part. So I don't know. Well, that wouldn't matter because then she has to incubate the eggs, right?
Well, she can hold it till the conditions
crazy.
were better.
That's what I'm saying.
It
That's
freezes
pretty insane.
tonight, and she goes,
Yeah.
glad I didn't lay those eggs yet.
Yeah.
Let me give it a week.
Yeah, it's great questions. There's a lot to be learned about what's going on there. One thing that seems to be evident is one thing that's important to her is be able to collect sperm from multiple males, and then that apparently comes through in the nest. The hen usually has multiple males, or a lot of the time, I'll say, has multiple males represented. So that's probably one function, but that's kind of a black box. Other than we know that she has that capability, there's not a lot known about that outside of that.
Is there a good way to age a turkey?
You asking the hunter or the doctor? The hunter's.
I'm gonna ask the PhD. Let me ask the PhD.
Yeah, so with obviously when you have a Jenny or a Jake, they don't have a full fan. That their molting pattern for that age class is pretty good all the way up until they're reproductively mature. That's a good way to tell a juvenile from an adult. Once you get past that with a male turkey, the best case scenario would be the spurs, and they do tend to get longer as they age, but there's a lot of variation.
Yes.
So,
Including in between the different types of turkeys. Osceolas tend to get a lot longer spur than an Eastern does.
yeah, and that's one of the traits when you measure a whole bunch of them, we see that trait tends to be longer in Osceola than in Easterns, right? But also there's some of this that might be genetic of individuals. So 1 2-year-old might have a different length spur than this other 2-year-old. Some of that could also be based on when they were born. So, for example, if we had the earliest nest in your neck of the woods that we ever detected was like the 1st of March. That's when she started laying, or actually, no, that's when she started incubating. So she started laying in February in that case. And the latest one for a first nest attempt, what might have been, I don't know, early May. So there's some those hens were quite different in their timing. That could drive things where it takes those jakes longer to catch up that were born late, so that might drive some differences down the road, but there's not that much data on it, man. It's just not very well researched, interestingly. What we're seeing in our Poult facility is there's a lot of variation between individuals, even when they're out of the same clutch. So it's probably generally getting longer, but things happen. They break them off. One turkey isn't going to be the same as other turkeys. So there's so much variation that might not be a really tight correlation, but it is generally getting longer.
From a Tom perspective, what would you say the for them to reach full maturity, where they're going to be, at the apex of what they're going to be able to do from not only a spur perspective, but a beard perspective, and obviously the beards can weigh down, and I would assume in some rocky terrain and stuff like that, also the spurs can get worn down a little bit too. What's that age where hey, I only want to shoot a 3-year-old bird, or because in the deer woods, right? There's this thing now, and it has been, you want to kill the oldest mature buck.
Yeah, that's fully expressing.
Exactly right. So what is that? How does that correlate to turkeys?
I would say if it's got a full fan and gobbling, and it's ready to to be harvested. Uh, I mean, I'll fill my bag with them, and they'll be fine. I'm not doing it for that reason, I guess. I don't know if there is a sweet spot where the 5-year-olds are going to be fully expressing their potential to. I don't know if that data has been collected to make an educated inference on that, but I would say that most of the desirable characteristics tend to get better in terms of a trophy animal as they age, with the exception of the beard, because they have things happening like beard rot, for example. That might be more likely after the bird's lived a few years for it to get that mite. So, otherwise the older birds would tend to be a larger body size and longer spurs. So that's the best I can do for you. Sorry.
Well, no, that's fine.
No, that's legit.
Well, and the reason I ask is because we're unfortunately we're at a day and age where everybody's chasing inches now, right? Versus maturity. So from a deer perspective, regionally it varies. So like if you're in our part of Kentucky, you're looking at something 140 plus. You drive an hour and a half north, and all of a sudden that animal's 150, 160. When you get into those parts of Ohio that we hunt, in South Florida, it's totally different.
If you're an Okeechobee and you kill a 120-inch deer, you've done something.
You just got them on. Right. So from a beard perspective, and that's what I see, on these turkey groups and sites. Oh man, I did 12.5-inch beard.
Just don't shoot the jakes.
Or it had 3 beards, and look at the spurs on this thing. So it objectively, not objectively, but based on what I see from a social media perspective now, that trend in deer hunting is also coming over to turkey hunting, where people, they're looking for those inches. Like it's, oh man, I killed a 13-inch bird today with 1 7/8 spurs on it, kind of thing.
Well, one thing I would think on that, Sean, though, is you can have this deer, one of these deer, versus that pretty 5-year-old 120-inch Okeechobee deer. They're night and day. A turkey is never going to have a 35-inch beard.
Sure.
They're never going to have 8-inch spurs. So you've got a much more finite range. People talk about they want to kill a 10-inch beard, or they want a spur to be 1.5 inches. Those eastern birds, 1.5 inch spur is hard to come by.
Big fun.
But down here, you kill some, not many, but you can kill 2-inch spurs. So that's just and whether their beard's thicker or thinner, but you just don't have the disparity from a mature Okeechobee deer versus one of these dudes or one of those Saskatchewan guys. So I don't know that the internet world, I hope to God that the internet world doesn't get that specific in the turkey world, or they can blow it out their asses.
Oh no, and I agree. I mean, a turkey's a turkey to me.
When you think about, when people take a trophy photo of a turkey, the thing that's prominently displayed always is the fan.
Yep, right behind your head.
That's just 2-year or older, right? And if I'm thinking about the characteristics, first of all, that's my criteria. I already told you that. If it's gobbling and white-headed and full fan, that's good enough for me. And then I'll see what happens. If I get one, then it's like I'm opening up a gift to see what I got, and whatever it is fine. Like I'm just happy I'm getting a gift.
Well, I can tell you, I've never passed a turkey because it had only a 6-inch beard. I can tell you that.
Exactly. Like if it met those other criteria, I'm good with it, and I'm not worried about it. So that being said, when I think, oh man, that is a giant turkey, I'm thinking about the spurs principally, Second would be body weight, because I've seen some that are just, beast body wise. And then, the beard length, I guess that's obviously playing into the scoring system, and that's cool. But, it's like they're always 10 or 11 inches almost. Maybe they have multiple beards, and that's really interesting, but it's because it's rare, right? Or they've got a paintbrush, but it's not the same. It just doesn't translate that well from the deer culture.
What causes, and that's where I was going with that. I was leading down to that. Did you have something? I'm sorry.
No, I just want to see how I shot an 11-inch beard last year, and I just want to see how old he was.
2 plus.
Hopefully, you hit him better than you hit that gator.
Stop dogging my gator, man.
That gator is dead.
Right?
Yeah.
Is the multiple beards on a turkey? You've got a couple like that.
I've got a couple like that. My cousin Clint and Infinite Wisdom, you're allowed to shoot them in the fall in Florida Gobblers. He had his 10-year-old shoot one. Well, he's 17 now, so 7 years ago. 7 beards. And cleaned him and cooked him and ate him. And I sent me a picture after the fact, and I said, Clint, do you have any idea what you've done here? So we got to researching it, and when you score turkeys, which I never knew that you score turkeys until that particular turkey, you add up all the inches. And he would have been like the number 3 bird ever killed on the planet Earth. And they fried him up. And no gobbling, no, so for me, I was like, God, you should have saved that bird for the spring. So you call him in there, and now you've got something. So it's a difference in grocery hunting.
Well, so the multiple beard thing, is that a genetic anomaly, or what causes that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so rare in populations. I suspect that it's probably a genetic anomaly. So that
Clint feels worse now.
Yeah. Well, he felt bad after I chastised him. And you're fixing to tell about our golden hen?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
You tell the story. It's good.
So I was in Sean's place in Kentucky in the fall, deer hunting, in a blind, and this bunch of turkeys came out. I don't know, they were 150 yards away, and as they worked down into this food plot, the sun's shining, and there was one that literally was copper. Looked nothing like the rest of the turkeys. It was clearly a hen. There was no red or white head. So I'm looking through the scope at it. This golden goddess of a hen turkey had about a 9-inch beard on her. So
that's a unicorn.
I called Sean and I said, you've got a turkey here that is something that I've never seen. I would trade every one that I've ever killed for a shot at this thing in the spring. And no, you're not going to call, well, you can call a hen. But I'm sitting there with a 7mm Ultra Mag or whatever it was.
300 short mag.
300 short mag. I'm like, it would destroy it. Nope. And it would have been perfectly legal to take her. But God.
And we had that turkey on camera all through the winter
and not
early
in the
spring. It was
but before
blanco.
the season.
No, blanco.
Gone.
They were just gone. And
Damnedest thing I've ever seen.
Win some, lose some. But Doc, you've been great with your time with us today, and I know we've already surpassed the allotted time. But can we, if you don't mind, if you can spare a few more minutes, and this is something that I wanted to get into, can we talk about prescribed fire a little bit and the importance of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me start with giving you some context for where turkeys grew up, so to speak. When Bartram was coming through, one of our early explorers, and he was a really elegant writer. When he was doing that in the late 1700s, he wrote all over his maps that he was creating Grand Savane, and that translates to Big Savannah. And Daniel Boone was saying Barren, which is basically Oak Savannah. And you start putting all that together, and actually a group of researchers did do this, and they put together a map based on all these early explorers and what they described in the eastern United States. And there's various other sources of data. When you put all that together and actually map it out, nearly the entire eastern United States at that time, they called a big savanna. So, and that was in Kentucky. Daniel Boone said that they went from eastern Kentucky all the way to the river, and they were never out of sight of turkeys. That's what he said. And when Bartram, I mean, literally, you're traversing the whole landscape, and he described the landscape as having sparse trees in a developed, I forgot exactly how he said it, but he's basically saying a herbaceous plant community with sparse trees. And he's never got out of sight of turkeys. And Bartram, in one of his passages, it sounds like he is lamenting that they can't sleep in the morning. And he said something about the cheerful converse of turkeys insofar that the landscape is in a universal shout for hundreds of miles in every direction.
Wow. Pretty wild.
So I'm paraphrasing, but he drew a map that he called all of it Grand Savannah at the same time. Now, let me bring you to the fire question. Why was all the landscape like that? That doesn't exist. We have some savanna left on the planet, but it only occurs when you have frequent fire involved. And what frequent means varies some depending on the soils and the rainfall and the length of the growing season and all that. But for the system, it's fast enough returning that it's a resting succession, and you end up with a sparse tree community, nearly full sunlight getting to the understory that's dominated by grasses and forbs, and you're absent a midstory. So that's the kind of landscape that fire promotes, and it actually can't exist in most landscapes without frequent fire. And that's kind of giving you a base for how you should think about fire. When you're using it to, and it makes also perfect sense why turkeys would really benefit from it. And let me just throw a wrench in the spokes real quick for y'all. They nest on the ground, right? In a system that we just described that catches on fire literally all the time during the middle of nesting season. All right. So a lot of folks this is one problem that I see and I get attacked about, because folks get all upset about you burning, and particularly in the nesting season. And I'm not advocating that we need to go burn everything in the nesting season, but it is kind of curious to me that we have a species that evolved in that landscape, and they still nest on the ground during the time when it would have burned all the time. So to me, that doesn't feel like it's going to be a big problem for the animal. And actually our data shows this when we track hens in places that were burning a large portion of the landscape during nesting. Almost none of the nests get influenced, which is interesting in and of itself. But when we come to the south and we have a system that there isn't a canopy to catch sunlight, and it reaches the forest floor, and that could be in fields, or it could be in broken canopied forests, and that could be pine or hardwood or whatever. But when we have that high sunlight interacting with frequent fire, that is promoting a suite of plants and a structure of plants that are really highly productive for turkeys. So in our part of the world, a 2-year fire return interval in the year that fire occurs in, that's really high quality brooding cover generally. And then the year after fire is high quality nesting cover. And if you go a little bit longer than that, in most areas where the productivity of the soils is high enough, we have such a long growing season, so much rainfall, that plant succession is so fast that just a little past 2 years, it starts to decline in quality for turkeys. And one of our studies, we show this. One thing that really influences nesting success is visual obstruction. So you imagine a hen sitting on a nest, anything from the outside being visually obstructed to her at that level. So just, basically waist high and below, that is good, right? The better that visual obstruction is, the better her nesting success is, unless that's driven by trees, and vines. So if you have that high visual obstruction, but that's a suite of trees and shrubs and vines that are a tangled mess that are up in the mid-story.
Hey, there he is.
There
Hey,
he
you're
is,
back.
yeah.
So let me just start over right there. When you have that high visual obstruction, that is good for nesting success in the hen, surviving nesting. But when that visual obstruction, like you think about lengthening the fire return interval so that now that visual obstruction is a bunch of trees and shrubs and vines, and they're getting up taller than us, when visual obstruction is being driven it substantially increases the likelihood that she dies during the nesting attempt. So, that's a concern, and probably a good reason why when you start to lengthen the fire return interval, you start to whittle away at the turkey population. You start to see them getting concentrated onto roads, or maybe they can only use the pasture ground, where it's being grazed. And that's a context where the forest is too thick. And what we see as a symptom of that, early on, is that hen survival during nesting starts to get poorer. And then hen survival in general starts to really decline as that visibility declines in the landscape. So, from a the blimp view of this, that is where prescribed fire is so important for us, is it is our best, most efficient tool at scale to maintain a landscape that's relatively open, and it also can promote a suite of herbaceous plants that benefit turkeys during nesting, and also when they're foraging as poults in that bottleneck window where they're so vulnerable. So we're, simultaneously, if we're using fire in a strategic manner, we can really maximize turkey populations because we're simultaneously achieving those key things that really affect their productivity.
I guess I was under the misconception that, I think about turkey nesting habitat, and I think about, tall normally, but I never really thought about it.
They need to be able to see.
They need to be able to see. I never
keep
thought
something
about
from
that.
sneaking up on them and catching them.
Yeah, and that does make, so there is very much a happy medium there.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about vegetation that's about shoulder height or less, and it's mainly being dominated by herbaceous plants. So they could be grasses and forbs, and you can have some trees and shrubs and things mixed in. But think about it from this perspective. She needs to be hidden. So, predator where it can't detect her visually. But she also, if she gets detected, needs to be able to escape it. Right? If a coyote finds her, she needs to be able to flush away. And if she's trying to get through a bunch of trees and vines and stuff, she can't.
Where I see, I talked about the mowing, right, with the batwing mower, and that was not BS. I've actually seen that happen. But what happens, when you're coming up to the farm there, and they've got that kind of pasture down at the bottom, where it's that intermediate section between the hardwoods and the pasture that typically is less than, I don't know, or at
more
knee
CRP
height.
looking high.
Right. It's not an actual hay grass that's in there, and that's where I've historically seen all the turkeys roost. They really, really like that, as opposed, nest, not roost, as opposed to the, back when I first bought the farm, we had those giant closed canopies. Obviously, there's no turkeys nesting in there. All it is leaf litter. I mean, you can see a turkey, several hundred yards away. So,
unfortunately, a few nest in there, and they do not do it very well.
I can imagine.
Or for very long.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with this is you keep beating me to the questions. You explain it too thoroughly. and I don't want to get in the hunting side so much because everybody's talking about turkey hunting this time of year and everybody's got their own opinion on it. But the thing that always comes up, we broached it very early on, is the spring season and the misnomer that it's mistimed. It's not peak 4 hunting. You've kind of touched on it a little bit, but you've got data that suggests otherwise.
Yeah, we're definitely capturing a lot of the gobbling. Now, whether or not the state wants to take the information we develop, which I'll also be very clear, I don't set all the regulations. I get data and then give it to them, and then they determine what they want to do with that. And they might ask me for my opinion, but other than that, I'm not a dog at that bowl. Yeah, I can say a lot. We are capturing a large portion of the gobbling in most parts of the state based on our data. And whether or not that could be moved to optimize it in different areas, that we certainly could cut it all up and do that, but it definitely increases complexity also when you do that. So that's really for the state to decide how do they want to take that information and implement it to make it a better hunting experience for everybody.
Well, and playing devil's advocate, what would prevent the state from pushing the season back, a little bit further to limit the number of turkeys killed?
That is their determination to make based on the information they have and the politics involved and everything. So nothing is preventing them if they decide that's the route they want to go.
I was going to talk about the turkey fraud thing, but we've been at this way long now. So I've got to.
Well, I can come back another time, guys.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I've got a rapid fire section, and we'll just go bang, 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 real quick, and we'll because we've kept you way too long. But if you don't mind bearing with us for a couple more minutes, we'll hit this, and then by all means, we've definitely got to have Dr. Lashley back on.
For sure, yeah,
100%.
I got a question before you hit him with the rapid fire. Okay. What's your turkey setup?
What do you mean? Just like generally, what am I taking?
410 man, your 20 gauge man, 12 gauge.
So I'm shooting a 410, Mossberg 410, the SA 410.
Purist. TSS?
It is TSS, yeah. So
are you happy now?
I have an effective ranged 40 yards, and I'm really confident to there. And I could probably reach out a little farther than that, but I don't want to. I'm trying to maintain what I fell in love with. And when I was a kid, we were shooting them at 40 yards and in, and I'm just kind of stick with that. I really like to challenge myself, so I don't carry decoys. I don't hunt out of a blind. It's all run and gun. That's just what I like. Don't frown on people that do it other ways. Y'all can do whatever you want to, but that's what I like to do. Last season, I got gifted this wing bone that was made by Lovett Williams, the historical researcher. So I kind of got hell bent that I'm going to kill one with this thing. So last year I hunted with only it. And that was
so last year you were not successful.
Well, I did pull the trigger on one, and my gun misfired, unfortunately.
Damn it, man.
I had him at 15 yards, but yeah, so that's the only time that's happened. But he walked into the grip of death with an angel on his shoulder, and he walked away.
Brother, man, it has happened. And before Sean's rapid fire, I've got a buddy of mine. He was actually a fraternity brother of mine there in Gainesville. He's a commissioner over in Hardee County now. And he once said to me, I called him on opening morning, I had been successful and he had not. And he said, Sumner, these damn things, he said, there's mornings you go out there and you wonder why they're not extinct. And there's mornings you go out there and you wonder how in the hell you ever managed to kill one.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the personalities difference.
Yeah. Also their testosterone's fluctuating day to day. So there's all sorts of things going on that we can't see, but it's definitely changing receptiveness from day to day.
Sure. I watch,
which is why you need to go every day.
Yeah.
Early and often. Wednesdays, Tuesdays, they're all good.
Well, I watched Mike Staffen wrap a brand new shotgun around a tree.
Yes.
Opening morning, we had turkeys come in. I think I had him in at 15 yards and brand new shotgun. He never patterned it. He never did anything. Click. I've
He also never loaded it, as it turns out,
Well, no,
which is a problem.
Well, no, it was a pump action, and he
Didn't close it hard
didn't
enough.
close it hard enough. And
Yeah.
you don't want to talk about somebody that was mad. Ooh, and you
Kind of
got,
like him with the rod on the shark.
oh, on the
in
gun.
Bahamas.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He resembles.
I would
that.
never do that.
All right. Well, let's get into these rapid fire real quick, and there's only a couple of them, so it shouldn't take long. And this is just whatever comes out, just quickly. So and this could go sideways in a hurry. What's the biggest misconception about, let's say, South Florida birds?
That they gobble different. I would say I hear different kinds of things, like they have a different sound to their gobble or things, and we haven't seen any evidence of that from other birds.
What's the hardest region to understand and hunt turkeys in?
I'd have to say the Southeast, just in general, and I would say that's probably because of pressure. There's so many people that love turkey hunting for a long time.
Best habitat improvement for a regular guy with limited budget?
Figure out a way to get brood rearing cover in your fields or on the side of your roads or in your woods. You can get that within a year of starting.
That's a good one. Very good one. One turkey myth you'd kill forever.
That one's a good one. Turkey myth.
I spend some time on these, by the way.
The drowning in the rain, like you said earlier.
I would say the burning is bad. There's a bunch of people that attack me over burning. That is absolutely false.
What do you know? Doctor. It says doctor right here on the sheet.
I don't know if you guys know, but on social media I go by Dr. Disturbance, and that is why. It's not because I'm disturbed.
Dr. Inferno, maybe, with all this love of fire.
Burn, baby, burn. I love
Dr.
turkeys,
Inferno
and
should
therefore
be
I
your
love
new
fire.
name.
Pun intended. One thing you wish every turkey hunter understood.
What makes turkeys?
Can you elaborate on that?
I think a lot of people focus on whether or not they have a lot of turkeys and not on what makes a lot of turkeys. And if we would step back and think through that, we could make some real headway on habitat management in particular on a lot of places, and we'd be making a lot more turkeys, and then everybody would have more turkeys.
What should hunters pay attention to this season? So, our season here opens in 2 days. So,
South of where we're sitting,
yeah,
doesn't open for 2 weeks.
right. 100 yards that way, it's open.
Yeah.
What should hunters be paying attention to this season that they usually miss?
Well, I would say, that's a good question. It depends on where you go with this, what context you're talking about. But I think one thing that's really important that's kind of ignored is kind of after the season, we have that survey period open and everybody can participate, and we get really great information from you participating in it. So go, when you see turkeys starting in June, report them. Like, how many are you seeing? How many poults do they have? That data is so important for us to figure out what's going on with populations, where we should spend time. It's affecting regulations ultimately that affect all of us. We need to all participate in that. And
So shoot them in June.
That's
Don't
what
shoot them.
That's
in
what
the
I
not
heard.
what the man said. Yes.
That's just what I heard.
We'll get with him after the podcast and square him back up.
It's like hunting camp here. So for us in the Saltlick group, we just handle everything like we're at hunting camp. So as soon as that door closes and the camera turns on, I'll assemble us a reality outside this door.
If I wasn't on campus, I'd be there with you.
Amen, brother.
Say, run up to AGR house. Emmett will pour you one.
Yeah.
All right, so Dr. Lashley, we appreciate the shit out of it. It's been a great conversation. So, yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. So, where can people follow your work and learn more about the UF Game Lab?
Yeah, that's a great thing. I appreciate you giving us that plug. So it's UF Game Lab. That's our handle, pretty much on all the social media. On YouTube, we have everything that we produce with visuals, so you can go there and watch stuff and learn how to do some of the stuff or learn about different studies we're doing and all that. If you want to see some of the Poult work, we document a lot of it so that you can see what that looks like on there. We also use the hashtag Florida Turkey Project, so we post stuff about it all the time. I personally go by Dr. Disturbance, so I'm on all the social media. You'll see a little difference in content. That is still science-based, but a little different than the lab. And we also have a couple of other resources. We have the Wild Turkey Science podcast, so go through this kind of stuff all the time and have lots of the scientists all over the range of turkeys talking about their expertise constantly. And we also have an online course where if you want to learn how to manage turkeys like a boss, then we've got a course that you can take on your own time online and help you decide how to manage it. So we have all those things available. And if somebody wants to know about something or has questions or anything, you can reach out through any of those venues and we'll be happy to help you.
And you guys have a giveaway currently right now, a raffle, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important for my lab, I operate very differently than most scientists. We use donations primarily or fundraising to fund a lot of the work because it's really difficult for me to fund what I need to if I'm operating under the constraints of some of our traditional funding sources. So we run things like this online shotgun raffle right now. All the proceeds are going directly into our turkey research. And we also have a banquet that we fundraise around and do various things like that. But currently we have a shotgun, a 28 gauge that was, it's a Benelli, and it's custom dipped in mossy oak full foliage, but really nice setup. And we have that online raffle, so you could buy tickets to that as well.
Is that not the NWTF gun of the year? Did I see that maybe at NWTF they were showing that gun off a little bit?
Yeah, we were showing it off there, but it wasn't gun of the year. But it's very similar to the gun of the year, yeah.
Gotcha. Well, listen, Doc, thanks a bunch for coming on. We're definitely going to have to do this again. Thanks for, spending way more time than we allotted today. We appreciate it very much. And,
I might need you to text my wife and let her know what's going on.
He's got to text mine, too. Don't worry about it. I'm dodging a mother-in-law, a sister-in-law. I was supposed to be home at least an hour ago. So, yeah he's got 2 texts to make there, Doc.
Okay.
Well, thanks a bunch for coming on. And, go Gators.
All right, go Gators. Appreciate it.
All right, appreciate you.
Thanks,
Thank
Doc.
you.
Thank you.